course, we are back with week number 2. We couldn't stop at just 1 week. Of course, we are back with the NECC. New faces on the broadcast. My name is Orbital. With me is the best minion to ever wander off the rift. It is Random Minion Caster. We will be your casters here for the second series of this season. It is going to be Drexel Esports going up against Illini Esports, and that, in my opinion, is going to be so much fun. RMC, how you doing today?
Straight chill and Orbital, and looking forward to this one. Speaking of new faces, Drexel Dragons, that's a new face, a team traditionally that competes in the East Conference for CLOL and NACE in the offseason. So this will be their first time here in the NECC, and up against them, of course, Illini Esports Orange. They're a team that has played here in the NECC before. Back in spring, they played and placed fourth in the Legends division, our very top tier. But as it always seems to go, Orbital, both these teams, they make a lot of changes every split. Students come, students go. Sometimes, hey, they've got to focus on other things. Sometimes they graduate. And both rosters are primarily new and kind of testing things out right now.
And I think that's a big part about it. I mean, some returning, some new, mostly new. Of course, you can go ahead and take a look for the Drexel Dragons. It is Sarnikol, as well as Lithuania, Casimir, Inoibi, and Shin. And there is one name on that roster, RMC, that you yourself and just about anyone in the collegiate scene knows very, very well.
Yeah, the one returning player, of course, their AD carry, Nori B. And it's not just the collegiate scene anymore. This guy has been making waves in North America Challengers Leagues, Open qualifiers, on BlackRock Esports, having a wonderful split so far this year. And to me, he's the threat we're going to watch out for. But on the red side, it is going to be Illini Esports Orange with Amity, the top lane, 5x5 in the jungle, Odyssey in the mid lane. And they're returning players of Refugo and Mythic NJA filling out the bot side.
And Mythic NJA is someone that I know very, very well, a very nice Zillion player, and one that, you know, making their return, I believe, was coaching for a little bit for Illini, and now jumping back into the player role, and that to me is a lot of fun as well. Of course, in the previous season, they were playing on this team, but I've talked with them, and they've had a lot of fun, but they're now they are facing off with Refugo inside of that bottom lane against someone that is touted as such a big deal, and here in the Fearless Draft, it is going to be very important that the bot laners match up to each other for both squads, and to me, that is that's a big challenge if you're on the Illini side.
For sure. I think Inoribi is a very intimidating guy to go up against. Now, Inoribi's support Shin is not a player he played with necessarily last split in collegiate, or last year, earlier this year in collegiate. So there is a bit of time, an opportunity for Mythic NJA and Refugo to maybe take advantage of that. And Refugo as an AD carry player as well, when he's doing well, that man can absolutely pop off. So this bot side definitely something for us to focus on. But Orbital, one thing we should reiterate, this is Div 2 tonight, starting in the West B division to be exact. And here in NECC, Division 1 and Division 2 are playing full Fearless, which means once a champion has been played, nobody else can play it for the rest of the series.
I love it. You know, listen, I saw Fearless all the way back, and I think it was like 2022. I said, I love it. I want to see more of it. And now pretty much I want to say any major league, and that sounds mean, but any major league that wants to kind of progress, it feels like Fearless is the way to go, and that's what I love right now. So taking that into account, we have one other stat for Drexel Dragons that I think was probably the funniest one I'd heard, considering how they like to play and how they want to play. Inoribi has drawn a multitude of bans, a few more than just about any other ADC out there would really like to have against them.
Yeah, that's in full Fearless. Last week they played up against Texas A&M and drew a total of 8 AD carry bans, not including the full Fearless, which would make that 9, nor the fact that potentially, I actually don't remember if the other team picked first, but that is potentially 9 to 11 bans if you include first picks taken away sort of deal. Yeah, Inoribi draws a crap ton of pressure. Whereas you look at Illini's side, Refugo doesn't draw as many bans necessarily, but Zillion's a perma must ban against Mythic NJA. So I expect to see that one perma taken away as well, and then Refugo might have his pick of the litter.
And for that matter, we are also taking a look at the rest of the lanes as well. You know, we talked about the bottom lane, but we do have to mention the rest of the laners that are going to be shaking things out. Specifically, one of the more interesting mismatches in the top lane, Sarnikol versus Amati. Sarnikol playing a little bit more of the bruiser side, actually whipped out a York, I believe, previously, and the Fearless seems to be bringing out some of the funnier aspects of some of the players. But Amati, of course, leaning more into that tank role, just kind of that bulwark in that top lane. I wonder how that's really going to play out, especially considering, even though you go tank, you still got the Udyr in the pocket.
Yeah, and interestingly for Amity on the other side, Illini faced up against KSU week 1. He actually didn't play the chunkier tanks that we see a lot in solo queue. You actually ran a Jackson and Aatrox, so more of a carry role, and running into Sarnico, as you mentioned, who likes his bruisers, like the lane bullies coming through. That could be a bit of a tough one if Sarnico gets that lead early. The scaling carries that we saw Amity play last week might not really be an option for him. We'll have to see how that one goes.
Of course, with both these squads, they are sitting at 1-0 each, meaning that today, unfortunately, will be one team's loss, but another squad will be rounding things out with a nice 2-0 to start off the season. So, with both of the rosters currently here, and both teams, of course, in kind of that rebuilding phase, RMC, is there one team that you are leaning towards? I mean, I preferably am leaning into Nori B if you don't go full-fledged 5 bans across the board, so...
Fair enough. And I'm going to be honest too. I am favoring Drexel a little bit, not statistically or anything, but just because of the way they like to play. They play an interesting game of League of Legends. Last week in ORB played Yasuo and Yone in the bot side. And yes, I know Yasuo is strong. Our producer Adam was, telling me all about the lethal tempo changes and how that affects the bot side. But nevertheless, he didn't have to go melee in both games. After all, once he played the Yasuo's off the table, he went straight to the Yone. Drexel's a team that seems to like to experiment a little bit. I'm always down to see that. Elina, on the other hand, they're trying to build up. I think Refugo and Mythic more... or not conservative, but a more stable bot lane, one that doesn't play too crazy. So if the Zillion's not bad, I'm down to watch that bot lane. If it's kind of bad, then well... I'm looking for a Nori B to make things interesting,
Imagine it's the Nori B Draven versus the Zillion and Mythic NJA. I'd be like,
yes.
Okay, this is gonna be a little bit silly. This is gonna be, and I'm so sorry. As much as I love Zillion, I don't favor a Zillion into a Draven at any point in my gameplay. Still, though, taking a look at the rest of the lanes as well, as much as you said that Drexel like to get a little bit silly, I love the fact that also in the mid lane, we got to go back to one of my favorites, which I personally hate when it comes to League. I know the League has had some fast-paced mid laners. I love the fact
is
that
it your favorite or do you hate it?
Love-hate relationship. Leave me alone. Taking a look, Casimir with a name like Casimir, they love the scaling. Kassadin and Vladimir in there. I love playing towards late game, and I love the fact that we can because of some of those mana changes recently that have come through. It's not... I mean, some people can obviously call it very overpowered, but I love the fact that we are getting that scaling back, and Kassadin can easily be a win con for Drexel as well.
Sure, and Casimir as well was Masters last split. He's a very mechanical player as well. He's picking scaling champions, but he's actually winning out his lanes. At least he did against Texas A&M. And with the Vladimir change that just dropped this week on the patch as well, I still think Vladimir is a really solid pickup. You can go in the mid lane. He just doesn't have infinite sustain like he had with the Sanguine Pool healing prior to this off of minions. I'm very curious to see if we do see bans come through against Casimir. Do we see Cassian? Do we see Vladimir banned? And because with the amount of focus they had on Nori B last week, I'm going to be honest, I didn't think that worked. And I think you're better off trying to pinch Casimir and then just biting the bullet when it comes to Nori B. But if it doesn't, then, well, if you're trying to throw 5 bans in Nori B again, Casimir can and will carry games if needed.
It's such a piece of the puzzle that for Drexel, I think they're actually really enjoying this. Remember, in Div 2, one of the big things is there's promotion and relegation. And in this kind of build-up period, you actually love the fact that you have such tangible options. Fearless plus, the up and down movement of the leagues. You need multiple different carries on the team. You really have to, because the top teams are not going to allow you to just have one core member that can be picked apart very, very quickly. So for Drexel, it's nice to hear that Casimir is like, hey, I can be that carry. If you're given that chance, let me go ahead and show that stuff. Same thing can also be said for Illini, as with them, they are a squad that have actually played in Div 1 previously in the NECC, and now moving down, it feels like they're given a little bit of a, I don't want to say training wheels, but especially with a three-man shift in the roster, I think it's going to be very nice for them leading into the future of the league.
That's favorable. If you won't say it, I will. I think it is training wheels, and I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. Keep in mind, Illini, they had a top 4 finish in spring with the roster they had, but with such a big change coming through, I actually think it's beneficial for them to go down to Div 2 and play up to Div 1, right? As you mentioned, there is promotion relegations now, so it's not as if you're locked in Div 2 by any means. You have ways of going up, and kind of a slower start to try and ease everybody in, I think would be a very good way to go about it. Usually the big focus for a lot of these collegiate teams is going to be C-Law, and that happens in the spring, in the summer, later on. This split, fall split, that's usually when you kind of experiment and try things out. We're into picks and bans, and we apparently have Fearless bans already in game 1.
Hey, let's go. Let's go. Entire just like main state. Look at that. Look at that. We got the Aatrox man. Oh, okay, okay. Love
You
our
know,
producer.
that's good for Illini. Amity didn't get Udyr randomly back for no reason.
I will give a big shout out. We got Adam on the production here. Where Adam is running production as well as observing for us. A big shout out to our production crew. One-man army, as I like to call them. Taking a look, though, the Draven is obviously banned away. You can't let that one go over. You and I were debating that one a little bit. The specialist picks are taken out of the table, but Drexel actually aiming towards that jungle side, actually giving a lot of credit over to Lithuania and saying, yo, we can't allow you to have kind of this ease of access to our back line. The Ornn on the other side, Illini still floating into all different lanes, which I do appreciate. You mentioned before, do you want to ban a bunch of ADCs? Probably not.
Yeah, and the Ornn ban coming out against Sarnical as well. That's interesting to me considering what Sarnical played last week, right? Things like Renekton, like Yorick, lane bullies to come through. And I think especially in a game one, when, you know, things are on the table, Renekton is really, really strong, pairs well with a lot of things. Sejuani's still in meta. Elise just got buffed as well, and she pairs incredibly well with the likes of Renekton. Nidalee still potentially on the table. There we go. There's the Cassidon. So just trying to take away some of the best individual champions away from Drexel. Drexel, of course, you know, the Zillion tax has to be paid. I'm really curious what the last ban ends up being here. If you're going to ban the J4, wow, I thought you just banned another ganking jungler by 5x5, something like, you know, the Skarner that he played last week.
But they are actually focused on Odyssey there in that mid lane and saying, hey, we just don't want to deal with that kind of skirmish-heavy team fight mechanic. And this... Ooh. This is going to be some spice of life here. Maybe throwing some love to Norby in the bottom side, but that can be flexed just about anywhere. Lethal Tempo back on the table, making a lot of champions more viable and flexible roles.
Yeah, and I really like the Yone right now. The scaling on it is really strong.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's go.
This does mean, though, that Yasuo and Yone are now both off the table for the rest of the series. The Win Brothers have been locked against each other. Now, the big question is whether they will lane against each other. And I doubt they will. I suspect that's Inori B's Yasuo.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I like this, though. Drexel's still bidding a very nice composition around this Yasuo, and that's what I want to see Illini do as well. With the, you mentioned it, the Sejuani is such a good staple pick, and Lithuania has a tendency to play into that wombo, I wouldn't say wombo combo, but just the AoE, brings that tankiness to the forefront. There is that Udyr that we mentioned a little bit before. I believe Amity will go ahead and try and run that in the top side. Could be a flex in the jungle, but I'm not sure. Looking on that bot side, though, we are taking a look at that Senna, still a very staple support in there, or can run into a little bit of that farm. I don't think so, though. That's a long time ago.
Okay, now with the Senna,
oh my God.
I will say there is the possibility that it's Senna Yone bot lane. Yeah, if Drexel did it, I'd say it probably is. For Illini, I don't know. Like, I feel like Refugo could play the Yone bot. I just don't know if he's practiced it. It's not showing up in solo queue very much, so that could be spicy. Drexel either way say we don't care. No matter, even if you're running melee, we're happy to go into you. We'll just take the Blitzcrank. We'll give you the free engage if you want. We are melee and we are happy to scrap.
I love the fact that we mentioned before that the Blitzcrank can get silly as well. Like, we see people take it out of sorts, and it's just like, it's wild to see. But yes, we assume that is going to be a little bit in the bottom side, and now we're going to see that shift. Drexel, we're going to wait to see if that fourth ban has come through, but we do see the Renekton holding pretty dang steady, which is still into that top side. Hey, we don't want you to deal with that one at all. Still focused up there as well as the Camille is being banned out as well. So overall, Illini's top laner, Amity, losing a lot of ground in the Bruiser game, which, again, as we mentioned, may like to do a little bit more tanky. And now we get a Kaisa ban. This is a lot of people assuming a lot of things, I think.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, right? Like, I'm a bit surprised with the Camille ban, because the Udyr I would have thought would have gone up towards Amity rather than in the jungle, right? So why do you need a Camille ban? And the Kaisa, likewise, are you then thinking that maybe it's not the Yasuo bot, the Yasuo mid instead? It feels like maybe the teams aren't